everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Amanda N, and today I'm going to talk about a fan-requested topic, which is the earthquakes in Alaska. I had no idea that they were such a massive problem, but I wanted to discuss them with you all, talk about what may be being done about them, so let's just jump into it. I apologize, first and foremost, if you hear my heat in the background. I guess it's appropriate considering the really cold topic we're talking about today. We're going to start by addressing one of the worst earthquakes I've ever heard of, how they're so bad, and what this may hold for the future of Alaska. Now, one of the most known earthquakes is the Good Friday earthquake. It happened on March 27, 1964. The earthquake lasted about 5 minutes, and it's one of the most powerful recorded earthquake in US history. It's also the second largest earthquake ever recorded, next to the M9.5 earthquake in Chile in 1960. One of the most impacted areas in Alaska was actually a little town called Whittier, because it's surrounded by water on 3 sides, and the seismic motion that's created just destroyed their pier, creating millions of dollars in damages. 13 people died, and the earthquake left one of their buildings, the Buckner Building, beyond repair. 12 bodies out of the 13 were tragically never recovered. This could be one of the reasons I've heard such strange things about Whittier being haunted and eerie, but that's an entirely separate video. According to The Atlantic, Alaska's biggest city, Anchorage, suffered numerous landslides, destroying city blocks and neighborhoods. An estimated 139 people were killed, most by tsunamis, including 16 deaths on Oregon and California shorelines. The old town site of Valdez was abandoned, along with reconstruction taking place on stable ground nearby. The rails, which were near the head of Turnagain Arms southeast of Anchorage, were torn from their ties and buckled laterally by movement of the riverbanks. The photos of this devastation is just horrific. It's not as if there was never an earthquake in Alaska before 1964, but this moment and tragedy certainly brought more attention to the matter. The Earthquake Alaska website shows that these earthquakes are incredibly common. According to one source, on average, there's a magnitude 7 or greater earthquake somewhere in or offshore Alaska every 1 to 2 years, and a magnitude 8 or greater quake about every 13 years. These quakes occur as a result of stresses caused by movements of tectonic plates that make up the Earth's outer shell. Any of you, if you took very basic science, I'm sure that you heard about tectonic plates. I remember learning about it in 4th grade, but just as a refresher, in this region, the Pacific Plate moves steadily northward at a rate of about 2 inches per year and descends or subducts beneath the North American Plate. These largest earthquakes with 8 and 9 magnitudes often create tsunamis, leading to the Good Friday destruction we saw earlier. Oddly enough, quite a lot of destruction or deaths that occur from natural disasters are because of the tsunamis that this creates. It's not just true of earthquakes, but volcanoes as well. Many coastal Alaskan communities are deeply affected by this. Alaska and its islands curve in the shape of the tectonic plate beneath it. The map of the earthquakes there speak for itself. Perhaps we just aren't as aware of these common quakes because the area is less populated. That's what some of my sources have said, because in Los Angeles, of course, there's going to be more people than the population of Anchorage, which is not even 1 million, it's 300,000, whereas LA, it's much, much greater. According to my recent Google search, actually, LA has more than 10 times as much, close to 4 million, so I think you get the point. Even so, I find the topic really fascinating. I would assume that California has the longest history of earthquakes, but it's Alaska. Californians simply seem to cause more damage and affect a greater population. According to sources, the Pacific Plate is being pushed below the North American Plate, as we said, at a rate of 2 inches per year now, and when these tectonic plates move, they stretch, they strain, and they contort. One U.S. Geological Survey researcher compared it to bending a Snickers bar and producing cracks at the top. It's not nice and neat. The source reads, Alaska will see more large earthquakes, but the USGS says scientists have never predicted one. The agency instead calculates probabilities and focuses on long-term mitigation of earthquake hazards by helping improve structures' safety. Alaska State Seismologist West said that Alaska sees so many large quakes that the state is often written off as a land of log cabins that can fend off major shakers. Besides the Denali Fault quake 90 miles south of Fairbanks, Alaska, in June 2014 saw a magnitude 7.9 earthquake, but it was in the remote Aleutians 1,400 miles southwest of Anchorage. West fears a magnitude 6 quake directly under a major Alaska city. It's all a function of proximity, he said. More than homes, an earthquake in the wrong place could damage Alaska infrastructure such as ports or power transmission, rail or communication lines, which have far less redundancy than other states. All in all, this has created what many have called a tectonic time bomb. Though reading these maps can get a little confusing, or at least for me anyway, the point here is that the Juan de Fuca Plate, the North American Plate, and the Pacific Plate all create an earthquake central around Alaska and California. The West Coast is a bit of a mess, to say the least. Subduction, a plate moving under, is also what gets so many volcanoes in the Pacific Ocean, hence why we've got the Pacific Ring of Fire with Mount St. Helen and Mount Fuji as well. As for if something's being done here, the answer is yes and no. The railways, telephone lines, those sorts of things are far more crucial in Alaska than in other places where it may be easier to repair. Don't forget the horrible winters up there as well. The Federal Emergency Management Agency also estimates that with the present infrastructure and policies, Alaska will have the second highest average annualized earthquake loss ratio, or ratio of average annual losses to infrastructure, in the country. Reducing those losses requires public commitment to earthquake-conscious sitting, design, and construction. The Seismic Hazard Safety Commission is committed to addressing these issues. Earthquake risk mitigation measures developed by similar boards in other states have prevented hundreds of millions of dollars in losses and significant reductions in casualties when compared to other seismically active areas of the world that do not implement effective mitigation measures. The Loma Prieta in 1989, Northridge in 1994, and Nisqually in 2001 earthquakes caused comparatively low losses as a result of mitigation measures implemented in those areas. Many of these measures were recommended by the state's seismic safety commissions. At the same time, while these precautions can be made, it's not as if anyone can stop these earthquakes from happening, and if one occurs under a major city, there's not a whole lot that can be done. Alaska has 11% of the world's recorded earthquakes. 3 of the 8 largest ever recorded earthquakes were in Alaska, and since 1900, they've had an average of one great magnitude or more earthquake every 13 years. Not to mention, as much as I'd love to believe this number is doctored, they continue to have 1,000 earthquakes every month. 1,000 a month. The majority of them may be less than a magnitude of 4, but in other words, that's an earthquake about every 15 minutes. Even though there's some fantastic sources committed to minimizing the hazards to Alaskans, personally, I'm just not so convinced that anything could get me to live there. That's just a personal thing. Sorry to any Alaskans watching this, but I don't think it's worth that beautiful Alaskan coastal view. Maybe just a visit. Maybe. Anyway, I'm really curious what you guys thought of today's video. Have any of you heard of the earthquakes in Alaska being this terrible? I really hadn't. I'm curious if anyone else has. Thank you so much for recommending this video. If you guys are curious about me talking about any other kind of scientific topic or any other state that you'd like to see discussed, or anywhere in the world, really, just let me know. Let me know in those comments, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!